the predator in you versus the one that is basically, the angel that's nurturing you. So you can always work with either one of them and say, hey, this is what, this is what I'm working with. And this is what, I'm all about. So the he brings that up, and then he also, if you remember, made a point about the fact that our souls are genderless. In a sense, we are not bounded by any specific gender. So again, it's an interesting fact that he brings up, and others have hold on one second. Let me see who's waiting. I don't think if there's anybody waiting. Okay. If you think about it, we are, everything about us is our soul, and our body is something that is there and it's not there. And the reason I say that it's there and it's not there is because the body is something that's ever changing, right? I mean, we all agree that none of us are the person who we were, like, let's say 4 years ago. If you're looking at us from a perspective of the way our bodies are, none of us are, anything that was before. We are all a new creation, if we were, because our cells keep reproducing themselves. If we were to think about everything that's about us is our cell, then that means that, every time a cell within us dies, then that means that a piece of us has to go away, but it doesn't. Let me give you another example. Let's say when you guys were kids, you learn how to ride a bike, a bicycle. And let's just say that for 10 years, you don't ride a bicycle. And all of a sudden you go to the beach and you feel like, hey, I want to actually ride a bicycle. And you get on a bike and you start riding. Fact of the matter is that the body that learned how to ride a bike 10 years ago does not exist anymore. Everything is, and so the question is, what is it that actually learned how to ride a bike 10 years ago, and how is it that I can actually just pick it up right now? Or any other type of trait or things like that you learn, and how does that work with you? Let me go a little further. Some of us know how to drive, stick shift, cars, just because of perhaps, places that we learn how to drive and things like that, or the type of car that we had the first time that, we bought a car. And I'm sure if right now, I mean, majority of the cars that are out there, it's all automatic transmission. If you go in and they give you a car with stick shift, it doesn't, you don't have to really try hard to actually drive that car. So how does that work within us? The fact of the matter is that what we learn, contrary to what everybody believes, is so the soul can actually, or the subconscious in this case of us, can actually do a lot than what we think. Because the body, if we're thinking that this is our body who's memorized all this stuff and so forth, the same body that learned how to bike certainly doesn't exist today. Okay. It's something to think through a little bit. And so that's why when it comes to understanding the greatness of human being, Rumi comes back and says, you have to understand who you are and what you're capable of. And out of that, what is it that you can do with what you have, and what you're given? Most of the time, we're a little too dependent on our body and our mind. And I think Rumi is trying to kind of free us up in this case as much as possible, so that we don't have to necessarily be too worried about what happens when our body goes away. I mean, in some other place in Masnavi, he's going to give us this example. He's going to say that what if your limb, what if like your arm is cut off? Does that mean that right now you only exist about 5/8 of you exists? If you get your both legs, God forbid, amputated, so does that mean that now all of a sudden half of you exists? It doesn't mean that, certainly, because who you are is not as who your body is. So everything about us is our soul. That's why connecting with our soul is so important. And that's why he went to great lengths to tell us that, by the way, your soul is not anything that is connected to your it's genderless. If you remember, it talked about that part as well. Let me just bring that line up.
Mohsen?
Yes.
While you're looking that one up, this reminds me of a conversation, in a sense, that Mohsen and I and a group of us had this past Sunday in a class about when you're resurrected. Are you resurrected in physical form or in a spiritual form? Which is essentially what you're saying, that if you lose half of your limb, you're still the whole body, you're still the whole person.
Yeah. So if I were to answer your question, let's say 10 years ago, I would have told you that we're resurrected by our body because of the story that we know of. There's a famous story about Abraham and how he was wondering how God would, reincarnate bodies, as he actually, killed, I guess he was told to kill 4 animals and mix all of their limbs and pieces together and put them across in 4 different mountains. And then, of course, he had to call upon them. And once he called upon them, every single one of them came together in the sense that they were. And so when I remember I was told about this story, and I'm just going to share my understanding of it, or certainly others can actually bring their opinion to this. But when I was told about this story, they told us, or whoever was telling us this, that this is how in the day of judgment you will be resurrected. And of course, that's before personally I was introduced to what Rumi has to say about resurrection and things of the sort. If I were to revisit that story and that conversation again today, I want to come back and say that the story that we hear is a testament to how capable God is. It's just that. It's literally the fact that it is him who is able to give life, and he is him who takes life, and that's it. That's what that story really tells us. When it comes down to resurrection, personally, again, this is my belief, and again, my belief comes majority of it comes from, having studied, the philosophy of Rumi, is that if I fully embrace who I am as a soul, and if I fully embrace the presence of God, and that's two difficult tasks, which has to happen in a sense simultaneously together. So if I fully embrace the fact that I'm a human being, and my being, as it says here, is the soul that was blown into me by God, and that's what makes up me, and this body is just a carrier, and I am at every instance of my life in presence of God. And if I were to initiate a conversation in form of any sort of prayer, it is me answering to him how well or how connected or how responsible I was towards my abilities and my surroundings. And that is basically what resurrection is in the eyes of what Rumi tells us. At every instance, he believes that we are resurrecting ourselves, and we have to answer to it. So if we think about it this way, then all of a sudden things are not postponed to sometime later when, for instance, the sun has to, come from the west and all that stuff. I mean, we've read all sorts of stuff about it and so forth. I believe that's what I believe. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I basically shared what I thought. Like
unmute.
Yeah.
No. I mean, from what I gathered, this is totally comes down to personal belief and understanding exactly how this is going to end up and how we're going to evolve.
It is, but also don't forget this. There's only one truth. So how we interpret that truth is of course, our choice. But the truth is there's no two truths. You know what I mean? There's only one. And the sooner we realize the truth within us, the better we can perhaps free ourselves from what sometimes is holding us back.
Right.
I think there are beliefs that at times are responsible for holding us back in our daily lives, and I think it's important for us to get that, understand it, figure it out, set it aside, and free the soul so that the soul can do what the soul does best, which is to connect. If you remember, this is basically what the lines that we read. It says, it makes no difference if it's feminine, the soul is genderless, alone within. It's too sublime for either gender's hold, for it's not something which blows hot and cold. The soul does not grow large by eating bread, nor turn like this and then like that instead. Since it's pure goodness, it does what is good. And this line only comes from the fact that soul is, a piece of God's being. Without it, there is no goodness understood. So basically, so this actually makes sense even in English when they say he has sold his soul to the devil. This is actually why that expression is such a powerful expression, because not only that person who we believe has sold their soul, his soul or her soul to the devil, not only they don't realize how valuable it is, the exchange that they have made has brought in something extremely evil within themselves. Whereas it's in conflict with the very essence of what a soul is, which in this case, this is what Rumi says. It says, without it, there is no goodness, because the soul is pure goodness. So if it's not there, then that means that you're not able to. That's why you say, like, this person doesn't have a soul. I mean, these are all English expressions. And as a matter of fact, these are just dawning on me how powerful these statements are. Okay. And then it says, if it's through sugar that you taste sweet too, remember sugar may abandon you. But when you turn to sugar through your states, then how can sugar ever separate? So it is the goodness that is within you. And then it's you realizing that there is goodness in me. Remember, so this is why the understanding of conscious and the subconscious is very important. This actually is why that now it makes sense why Rumi says that dreams are, how important dreams are. So think about it. We all agree that the subconscious never sleeps, right? I mean, your subconscious is always awake. Your conscious mind does sleep. As a matter of fact, when the conscious mind is not working, that's when subconscious actually picks it up and just does what it's supposed to do. And that's how powerful subconscious is, because with the entire conscious activities that you have, if you can have only a few minutes of subconscious activity, you are able to actually create magnificent stuff. Okay. And the only reason that subconscious is so powerful is because the subconscious immediately knows what to connect to. It doesn't connect to your mind. It doesn't connect to your ego. It connects to your source, which is the goodness that comes from God. So that's how powerful subconscious is. So think about that. Now, take this a little further. We've heard throughout, what we have read so far out of Masnavi, that Rumi believes, has a very, very strong belief in dreams. He says that what you actually see in a dream is the truth, and what you see in reality is the inverse of it, as a matter of fact. So the reason he says that dreams are the truth is because he believes that once the conscious mind goes to sleep, the subconscious is now free to go where it's supposed to go. This is why, for instance, now let's take it another step further. Nowadays, you guys know about meditation. Everybody talks about meditation. There's apps about it. There is, music about it. People, pay amounts of money to meditate. And the only thing that the meditation does is it just puts the conscious mind into rest. And the only reason you do that is because you want to bring the subconscious into a space that it can actually do what it's supposed to do. Now, this is all something that Rumi has been telling us so far, that it is your subconscious that does what it's supposed to do. It is you who allow it to do it. Now, this is why before you sleep, they always say, hey, try to actually have some good thoughts. Try to actually see something funny if you want to sleep well, or, try to meditate, or try to do anything that actually your mind lets go of all these destructive thoughts. Why? Because these destructive thoughts, if you actually go to bed with it, it would distort what subconscious is supposed to do. And your subconscious gets affected by it. That's why all of a sudden, if you have had a fight with somebody during the day and you keep thinking about it, that night you're going to have a dream about that person.
Oh, yeah.
Try it. Yeah. All of you guys have experienced that. And anyways, this is why, again, he's telling us all of this stuff. And now he goes in and he tells us about our mind. He says, the intellect denies love, but would claim it's privy to love's secrets all the same. So our mind is like, I know it. Don't worry about it. Don't think that I don't understand what love is. And in this case, love, this is why all of a sudden love makes sense for us. Why? Because we're talking about goodness. The goodness only comes from a loving soul. And a loving soul is the soul that has been, given to us. So that's why then all of a sudden when we say everything in this world is out of love, makes sense. It seems, so then he goes, it's just a know-all. And in this case, he's, this is the mind that he's talking about. And then after that, he says, so our mind, it tells us that, I know everything. But he says that in order for you to become angels, so become an angel, you have to, and if you remember, I said, this was a bad translation. So you have to defy and deny everything else and only accept the presence of goodness within you so that you can actually transform from the devil into an angel. It's just the realization of that goodness within yourself.
You mentioned that this was, the annihilation was the law of
the law. That's right.
In Farsi, does it indicate that?
Yeah, he says until the angel didn't become law, he's a devil. That's what it says.
Oh, so it just says la, and is that the same word in Arabic as in Farsi?
Yeah, la ilaha illallah is the same way. Yeah, it's the same word. So now, after all of this, then, he talks about, of course, the prophet and the fact that, here is a soul who is perfect, who has realized the goodness within him, and of course is blessed to be the prophet and has been connected to God as well. Again, that's basically what, he's saying that, God is at. And this is how the relationship between the God and the prophet is. Now, prophet has got two different sides. Fine. One is, of course, the fact that on earth, he's got, sometimes he calls his wife and says, hey, come and talk to me. You're my wife. Obviously, he's a human being as well. He does, have human needs. But then at the same time, he actually calls to Bilal and says, hey, why don't you then come and just, give us that, heavenly voice so that I can actually connect with my source. Okay. So having said this, we're now at a point, it says the story of Aisha asking the Prophet, it rained today when you went to the graveyard. So how is it that you
finished?
I'm sorry?
We got up to Muhammad said, Bilal, refresh us all.
Where did I?
The rest
sorry, where was I?
Like 2000.
Okay, my apologies. All right, then I'll just go back to that. Okay. All right. So Muhammad lost himself in that fine voice, and that's Bilal's voice, of course. And yeah, all right. So lift up for us your powerful voice once more. With breath I breathe inside your big heart's core. The breath which once left Adam so amazed, made heaven's fold feel mesmerized and dazed. Muhammad lost himself in that fine voice. His prayer was not performed then by God's choice. Okay. He didn't lift his head, asleep he lay. His dawn prayer thus was subject to delay. So he is referring to So here's the deal. When he wanted to connect, he would ask Bilal to give azan. And that call was the call that was his soul basically freeing itself up and basically going and connecting with his true source. So in this case, there is one day that apparently it has they call it the ta'ris, or the night of how should I say it? The night that he didn't wake up or something like that. One day, the Prophet misses the morning prayer, and the reason he misses the morning prayer was that his sleep was too long. But the sleep that he had, what he's trying to say is that his connection was so strong and it was too long that he wouldn't want to get out. So he missed the physical morning prayer of this world. Okay. So he says, yes.
Just one question, like earlier it says, with breath I breathed inside your big heart's core. Is that the Prophet? Is that the Prophet saying that, or is that God saying that?
Which part?
Lift up for us your
That's
powerful.
the Prophet saying it. Lift up for us your powerful voice once more. That's the Prophet telling Bilal.
Then the next line, with breath I breathe.
Oh, with breath I breathe. So let me just make sure I'm going to compare this to the Farsi. Okay, so not a good translation, sorry. So this should have been that breath which once left Adam so amazed. So he's talking about the breath which Bilal uses, which is the same breath that Adam was amazed by it. Okay?
Yeah.
And it says, made heaven's fold feel mesmerized and dazed, which in this case, it says, that same breath, which, every creature in the entire world has been just mesmerized by it. Why? Because that's, again, the goodness within each of us has that breath as well. And in this case, Bilal had realized it. And Bilal was able to actually recite the azan by connecting with that. Okay. Muhammad lost himself in that fine voice. His prayer was not performed then by God's choice. And the reason that was God's choice is because he just stayed in the subconscious too long. He didn't lift his head asleep, he lay. His dawn prayer thus was subject to delay. But with the bride alone that previous night, his soul kissed both her hands and saw her light. And Rumi is basically the reason that the Prophet didn't wake up was because he was saying that in that night he was alone with his beloved, and he just didn't want to wake up, and he was perfectly happy being where he was. Love and soul are veiled in the unseen. Now, this is an important statement in here where it says love and the soul are veiled in the unseen. So unseen is the subconscious in this case. He should have actually used that word rather than the unseen. But it says that, these things are veiled and they are together. And in this case, they are actually one, but they are veiled. They are not, as obvious to all of us, because I call them bride, don't scream obscene. Is like I use the word bride, so I'm trying to make sure that you understand how delicate and how important it is. So don't get upset that I actually use this metaphor. I broke my silence not to be a bore. would that he'd given me a little more. Now, in this case, he's now saying that, I was given a little bit more strength, and I actually have been talking about this, but I shouldn't talk anymore. Then he says, and in this case, he is the source. In this case, he is the goodness within him, which is a connected soul. He says, speak up. It's not objectionable. Fate does decree in the invisible. So he's saying that it's okay, and it is the fate of of the people who are hearing it. So say what you have to say. Fault lies with those who only see what's wrong. With such as these, pure spirits can't belong. So think about, the stuff that we hear these days, again, as part of what people say, like, these are new consciousness, discoveries of this world. None of them are new. I've always been there. The reality is that if you always see wrong with everything that is in this life, then that's exactly what you're going to get. Again, I also have quoted you guys from somebody, from Wayne Dyer. It says, like, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at will change. So it's our perception, it's our frame of mind, it's our direction of where we look that actually dictates how things are. Fault lies with creatures who are ignorant and have no link to the omnipotent. So yeah, there are people who are ignorant, and they are rather, they just don't want to. They don't want to know. They don't want to be educated, or they don't want to be enlightened, in a sense. For God, through unbelief, is wisdom too. For God, though unbelief is wisdom too. It's just a curse if held by me or you. And it is like, don't you think that anything that's been created in this life is bad? Everything that has been created, there's a wisdom behind it, whether it's belief or unbelief. And the unbelief word that is using in here, I think, is kufr, or which is kafar or kufr. And he's like, don't think that the unbelief for God, is something that's like, useless. There was a wisdom behind it. We don't know it. We can't get it. Why we can't get it? Because we've got a mind that's dictating exactly what we have to believe in and what we have to understand. For if impurities are mixed with gold, it's like the candy stick you have on hold. They're both weighed on the scale as if one whole, together like the body and the soul. So it's like, the unbelief and the belief within you is just like as if you get a candy stick, which has got candy and some other stuff in it. They all come in the same package. And your body and soul is the same way. So this is interesting. Think about it. Your soul is made out of pure goodness. Whether you understand that or not, it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to realize the goodness in you. The soul never, the soul itself, the essence of it never changes. It's always that. Whether you connect to it or not, that is something different. That's your understanding. That's your thoughts. That's your realization of your conscious and your subconscious, and how you actually allow your subconscious to connect. Okay? Other than that, everything have got a pure essence by themselves that is made out of love and it's made out of light. Now in here, what we do to our body affects our soul. So think about how we treat ourselves and how we are treating our soul as well. So together, like body and soul, the greats did not speak idly. They were sure. For pure soul men, their body just as pure. So people who were great, it's not just like they were, great in their soul was great. They were also great. They were connected, and their body and soul were the same.
Mohsen, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
So is my understanding correct that everybody when they're born, they're given a clean slate and a good soul.
Yes.
And the will that you have is essentially determines to bring it out or leave it stay there.
That's correct.
Okay.
Think about that. Go to, I mean, if you go to a hospital, to children's ward, there is a different, I mean, so I was hospitalized once for like 7 days for a problem. And they were telling me that I have to walk around because, of course, you know, being on the bed for so long is not good. Okay. So one day I decided to actually, they told me they could walk around anywhere in this ward or in, and where I was, somehow later on I found out that there's code blue in the hospital, and code blue is basically if somebody apparently is about to die.
Yeah.
And every day I heard at least once or twice that code blue. And, you know, it was, you know, I mean, I had friends who were visiting me at that time. One of them he's very funny. And unfortunately he passed away, but it was so funny. Every day he came, and he would come at the same hour, like around 2:00 in the afternoon. And the first thing he would say is like, "Hey dude, the guy who was here next door, he's not there anymore, man." So he would start his conversation with that. It's like, "Did you hear code blue?" And I'm like, "Yep, it was him." So one day I decided to actually take a walk on the children's ward where there are, you know, all the newborn, you know, all the deliveries happen and all that stuff. It's so interesting that I felt different walking through that ward. I actually, as a matter of fact, I felt out of place because I had an IV hooked up to me and everything. But then I was like, this place it feels different. There was life. Somehow you felt like there was life there. Where I was, the floor that I was in, there wasn't any life. It was death. And he was coming twice a day. I could see that. So the fact of the matter is that when somebody is born, they are born with that pure soul. I mean, that's exactly that's the energy that they're emitting. And the problem is, of course, as they start growing up because of the experiences and the places that they're at and so forth, things just change. Talk to someone, if you know anyone, who's been in prison for like 4 or 5 days, not days, years, sorry. They would tell you that I miss seeing children, and that doesn't mean that they're a pedophile. There is a specific energy associated with a child. There's certain purity that comes from that. This is why these days, people, believe it or not, these days, pet ownership has gone up. The fact of the matter is that a pet soul is a soul still. It has a soul, believe it or not. And you, hands down, everybody is going to tell me that a pet, a dog, or a cat even, I don't like cats though, but they always would give you unconditional love. Think about that. How does that work? We want to give so little to them and we expect so much from them. Why is it? Because we have a deficit. We have a deficit in feeling good. And one thing that Wayne Dyer tells us, if you guys read his books, he says feeling good is like feeling God. And the reason we want to feel good is because we want to feel God. And the reason we want to feel God is because we want to connect. So feel good. Do what you have to do to feel good. And you always want to keep that feeling. If it's temporary, you hate it. When it goes away, you get depressed. That's why we need to get connected to our subconscious so we can trigger ourselves to connect to it every time to feel good. So that the goodness comes from within us, not from outside of us. And this is, yes.
I don't know whether you realize it or not, but you say things that are just so deep and so valuable, is almost unbelievable. Is the price of the whole admission is just that one sentence. God bless you.
Thank you. No, I'm glad you're here, though. I mean, I'm not. Thank you. But seriously, think about that. Think about this is us. Again, it's us. It's realize how big we are. And Rumi is telling us all this, by the way. He is trying to get us to understand that this is there's such a big and capable goodness within us that we're just completely neglecting it. We're neglecting it. We're so consumed with everything else. So the soul's mere body, if it thinks them foes, worth naught, like backgammon dice overthrown. Now, what does this mean? Let me hold on. So he's talking about he's talking about the people. So in the line before, he says their speech, their soul, their body, their face are absolute pure soul that leaves no trace. Now he's talking about pure souled men in this case. Okay, so the pure souled man, this is how Rumi explains that. Then he says, there are others that the soul's mere body, if it thinks them foes. So there are those who think that these people are not friends, they are foes, worth not like backgammon dice overthrows. Now, in this case, these guys, in backgammon, those of you who have played, this is a bad translation. So the whole entire thing, strike it out. What he's referring to backgammon and reading from the Farsi one. Those of you who play backgammon, you always want to make sure that so you bring all the pieces into your own house or in your own section, and you want to make sure that you at least have two on top of each other, right? Because if you have only one, you're susceptible to be taken out by the opponent if he brings the right dice number. Okay, so he's saying in this case, he's saying those who think that these people are not friends and are foes, and we do have people who believe. I mean, I think Rasul was saying that apparently you and Mohsen know somebody who thinks that Rumi is complete, I'm sorry, bullshit. So he's like, it's as if, you know, his piece doesn't have anything on top of it. He's susceptible. He's susceptible to get hurt. You're not protected. Let's put it this way. You're just not protected. And it's funny that in the Quran it says that ala bi zikrillah tatma'innul qulub. You call God and your heart will be in in his trust, and he will protect you. And this is what it is. You defy that. All you're doing is you're actually bringing more harm to yourself. Believe in what you say and believe in these statements in a sense that, you know, we have to find and realize the goodness in us. That one returns to soil and turns to earth, while others in white salt with pure rebirth. So he's like, in this case, the people who don't realize the goodness in themselves, eventually they will return to earth, and everybody returns to earth. But the ones who realize the goodness are going to have a much purer rebirth than the ones who don't realize the goodness in themselves. Because we have to realize it. So this whole life cycle that we're in, and all of us are in a life cycle, is taking us towards completion. And it's taking us towards becoming better and better. So now he says, salt made Muhammad the most excellent. Okay. So in this case, there is a it's funny. It's a hadith that he's referring to. So salt made Muhammad the most excellent, than that well-formed hadith more eloquent. This salt's his permanent inheritance. His hairs are with you. Seek him out at once. So in Farsi, there is an expression which is called, so salt in Farsi means namak, okay? And then there is a word, it's called namaki, which if I were to say it in English, I should say salty. And a person who is namaki or salty in a Farsi statement means that they're cute or they're witty or something like that. That, you're always entertained when you're with them. So there's some, and normally the namaki and the word it's salty, it is used as to somebody's facial features. So you have two words to describe, or actually, let's say three words. So somebody's ugly, unfortunately. I'm sorry, this is the words that people use. Somebody's beautiful, and somebody's salty. And the salty one actually is in the middle. Okay, now, what does the Prophet's hadith really mean in here? What he means is salt has another characteristics, which that if you actually leave anything in salt, it doesn't go bad or it doesn't go sour. So for instance, those people who want to age beef or meat, they basically put the meat in salt. Or you make again with fish they do the same thing, or
different kinds of pickles.
Exactly, or pickles or things like that. So what the Prophet meant when he says that Joseph was beautiful, but I'm saltier, what he means is that I was able to bring more purity to people than Joseph. Doesn't really mean that he was beautiful and I'm not as beautiful as he is, but I'm salty in face. Okay, so I went through all that explanation to tell you what, but you had to have the whole context though.
Yeah,
to fully get it. So in this case, this is what this statement really is referring to. So salt made Muhammad the most excellent. So the fact that he was able to save so many souls made him the most excellent. Okay, than that well-formed hadith more eloquent. This salt's his permanent inheritance. His hairs are with you. Seek him out at once. One sight before you. Which way do you face? Where is the soul that contemplates each trace? So he's saying that the interesting part is what is before you is the choices of whether you want to go the choice of realizing the goodness in you, or the choice or the path of realizing the evil in you. Which way are you going to go? This is where your choice, exercises itself. We are given choice. We are, we talked about this, that the greatest gift or the greatest, safekeeper that was given to us by God is the fact that we have choice. So we make these choices on a daily basis. Which direction do we want to go? One sits before you. One of these. Which way do you face? Do you face the one that is, pure and brings you purity, or do you actually face the other way? Where is the soul that contemplates each trace? If you imagine you have a front and back, your body's trapped you, soul inside you lack. Now, in this case, it's like people think that they are completely trapped, whether with what is before them and what is in front of them. And he's trying to kind of also free us up from that, in a sense, saying that, hey, this is your interpretation of how your body and your soul is trapped, by understanding that there's something that's in front of you and there's something that's completely begone. But that's not how Rumi sees stuff. He sees them as a choice of between the goodness and evil. Open your eyes to vision through his light. Avoid the search that's the short-sighted plight. You are trapped in joy and grief, completely blind. Where is front and behind? Now, in this case, so your belief is the fact that this is it. You are trapped between joy and grief. And by the way, those of you who have studied, any marketing courses and so forth, everything about marketing and everything about our commercials that are used in marketing is all about relationship between grief and joy, or happiness and sadness. Every commercial starts with a sad, story, and all of a sudden, the person is like, oh yeah, are you sneezing? Are you coughing? Are you having a sore throat? And all that stuff. Take this and oof, all of a sudden, the butterflies are all over the place. I mean, this is the relationship that, we are very well aware of it. And Rumi knew this. And Rumi exactly, he's stating it in here, that you're trapped in this joy and grief and so forth. However, the non-existence part is that's not the right translation. It's not in non-existence. That's not what it means. He's trying to tell us that we come from the nowhere place. Remember, we come from nowhere. We are here now, and we go back to nowhere. We talked about this at some point, I think. So we come from the place that is unlimited. So the place that's unlimited, we call it non-existence because everything that is in existence for us is in this world. So it's something that's beyond this that we call non-existence, or the nowhere. So it says you are from that place. So if you believe that you are from nowhere, then in nowhere, there is no front or back. Because it's not a place. Which that's something that our mind is having a very hard time understanding again.
What's the word in Farsi?
Adam.
And that's nowhere.
Adam is basically the, and I think we translated this to another word as well. I forgot what word we used for it, but this is not the first time that we used Adam. Does anybody remember that?
Adam is the opposite of existence.
Exactly. So what is the opposite of existence?
Non-existence.
No kidding. Okay. No, but it is the, so I think I've utilized an analogy again that's come from Wayne Dyer. It says we are from nowhere, so the no place, and then you move the W, to the left, and now we are here, and then you move the W again, and then you go back to nowhere. So the nowhere, or the non-existence, or the,
actually, it could also mean nothingness.
The nothingness, basically, yeah. So that place has no limitations. Right. Everything that has limits is basically this life. Our life, the one that we're experiencing, has limits. I'm feeling the limitation of gravity right now. I'm also feeling the limitation of, for instance, my knees. That right now, I'm standing up, and it's giving me grief. It's limitations. But in non-existence, or in nowhere, or somewhere that none of these laws apply anymore, then there's no front or back. So he's like, you have to imagine yourself in that space. And the only way for you to imagine yourself in that space is when you become familiar with your goodness, which that's the subconscious in you. So if you imagine yourself in there, then you're all good. You all of a sudden you have freed yourself from joy and grief, because joy and grief also is a byproduct of existence. When you exist, you feel joy, you feel pain because of what happens around you. Okay. So the story, it says, today's raining, walk until it's night. It's a special rain God sent to those with sight. This last line is basically a segue into the next story. And the next story is basically a story of a conversation between Aisha and Prophet. And that's exactly how the story is. It says the story of Aisha asking the Prophet, it rained today when you went to the graveyard. So how is it that your clothes aren't wet? Let's see what happened. So the Prophet visited the graveyard one day because one of his friends had passed away. With handfuls of dry earth, he filled the grave, thus to a precious seed, new life he gave. Interesting line in here is that Rumi, just like how we actually plant a seed and a life begins, he believes that when we actually bury the body, a new life begins. Okay. Just like the interred men, plants we see around, all lift their outstretched hands up from the ground. Bad translation. So this refers to the, one of the ayahs from Surah Qaf, ayah number 11, which, let me just bring it up real quick. All right. So it says, as sustenance for Allah's servants, and we give new life therewith to land that is dead, thus will be resurrection. Now, this doesn't do the right translation of what we're looking at it in here, but let me also look at the Farsi translation, because it's Rumi is using, so the hands that are kind of resurrecting themselves, Rumi is using the metaphor of the trees and how they actually grow and they're green and there are, branches that come out of them just like the hands. And he's referring to this ayah with that. Okay. Now, having said that, let's go back here. Let's go back to our lines. So just like the interred men, plants we see around all lift their outstretched hands up from the ground. So what he's saying that if you actually see the plants, you can just imagine how life begins again by them being in the ground and then, stretching their hands out and, also display the life that started from under the ground. To human, they give countless signs so clear. They speak to those of us with ears to hear. So what he's talking about is, again, these souls which stretch out and, stretch out and they show their, the hands to everyone. Okay. So in this case, the people who are willing to listen, as Rumi is saying, in this case, listening means like Rumi believes. By the way, this line is not from Rumi; it's from another poet in Farsi named Saadi. He says that anywhere I look, I see God, and that's just because everything that he sees a resemblance of God. Now think about that. Everything that you see around you is somehow creation of either God himself or the creation of the goodness that was within us, which then created what we see, or how it manifests in front of us. So the reality is that as you see it, you have to see God. You can't see anything else. Think about that a little bit. Now here he says, to humans, they give countless signs so clear. They speak to those of us with ears to hear. If you want to listen, they're talking to you. It's important. The only way we can listen, remember, it's not talking about listening with this ear. It's listening. It's as if you're actually aligning your frequency with the frequency that these guys are talking. They would never come down to your frequency. You need to elevate yourself to their frequency. So how do you do that again? By realizing the goodness in you. Once you find the goodness in you, you elevate your own soul. You bring out what is in you, in your subconscious. You realize that, and you start elevating yourself. And that's when you start elevating into the frequency, now that you can actually capture what these guys are saying. It's as if you have a transistor radio. If you remember transistor radios back then, the way it works is that you had to actually turn a knob until you align the radio with the frequency that the radio broadcaster was broadcasting. That's when you could hear. Same thing with us. We need to elevate and we need to align with them. Like birds with with outstretched hand, or like a tongue that's green, they share earth's secrets, which lie deep unseen. Now he's saying that in our life, as we see it, as we experience life, and as we go about our daily lives, these outstretched hands, he's right now only using the metaphor of the trees and the plants. It's like these things are talking to you. And what are they telling you? They're sharing earth's secrets, which lie deep unseen. And what is the earth's secret that they actually hold? And they're trying to tell us. What is the secret?
I like to point to the resurrection, this kind of stuff.
It's a secret of life. Yeah, it's the resurrection. It's a circle of life. They're trying to tell us. This is a circle of life. Okay. Like birds with heads in the water that soon rose, as peacocks, though, they used to be mere crows. Now, he's talking about, again, these trees that are talking. He says he's using a metaphor of, in this case, he's talking about the ducks, the birds that have, put their head in the water. So he's like, when they are, actually, this is connected to the next line. Let me read the next line as well. In winter, he had locked those crows in gall, but now he's given them a generous tail. Now he's talking about the fact that I have a feeling that peacocks are of the family of crows. Somehow I think Rumi is making them related to each other. I don't understand whether they are or not, but it looks like they are. What he's saying is that the secret that he's saying is that there is a time that is called winter. In the winter, everything is dead. And in this experience that we have, which, we go back to our nothingness, and we experience that, then there is a resurrection, or then there is a birth. And in that birth, once you experience the winter, there is a gorgeous tale that's given to you, and you are transformed into a beautiful bird like a peacock. In winter, he grants death, and each one grieves, but then revives them in the spring with leaves. And now he's talking about the trees. They live on by themselves. Denier said, why then attribute this to God instead? So people who deny this are like, oh, come on, this is how life is. Why do you attribute all this to God? And this is true. A lot of people do say this, despite their blindness. In his friend who know, God's planted orchids which will always grow. So it's like, what they don't understand is that those people who are connected within themselves, they have a bed of flowers like orchids, and these things are always glowing and always blooming, and they're always beautiful. So what these guys don't see is that what they see outside is the reflection of what happens inside of them. So what you see outside, if you actually see a tree, if you see a flower and you see a reflection of God in there, what Rumi is trying to tell us is that once you realize the reflection of God in a flower, that means that you have realized God within yourself. Because that reflection also exists in you. But if you believe that, the flowers just bloom when they have to bloom, obviously then within you, there is no flower to bloom either. Every sweet smelling rose that you should see reveals God's every sweet smelling rose that you should see reveals God's mysteries so openly. Despite this skeptics' claims, we smell their scent across the world wherever veils are rent. And in this case, he's talking about the fact that eventually the goodness of these beautiful souls is so much that eventually would open up these closely held drapes, and it would just totally, cuts them open. Like bugs on roses, skeptics clamber off. Their ears can't bear truth drums, so they just scoff. They act like they're immersed in what we say, but when the lightning flashes, turn away. And again, this is very true about every situation, every society, and every experience. I mean, I believe that right now we are even experiencing this stuff. We have turned our eyes away from what's shown here. The eye seeks safety first when ruled by fear. And what is it that they fear? The fear comes from their ego. Their ego tells them that you can't believe that, because if you believe that, I can't protect you anymore. And because they're so used to protection from their ego, they cannot let go so that they would be protected by God. I mean, that's the exchange that we have to make mentally and consciously, not subconsciously, consciously. But when we start looking at it consciously, the ego keeps coming in. Oh, you're having a problem here. You are not protected here. You're not doing the right thing here. I can't do this with you here. To his wife Aisha, then Muhammad turned on coming home to share what he had learned. But when she saw his face, she felt surprised and touched him, just in case it was her eyes. So Prophet comes home and Aisha is like, she starts touching him. Why? Because his turban, face, and hair she touched and felt, his collar and his sleeves. So she also smelled. The Prophet asked, what do you seek this way? She said, I saw the rain pour down today. I've checked your clothes in case they are wet just now, but there's no trace of rain. I'm wondering how. He asked, what's that you're wearing on your head? What was it that you actually wore on your head today? Or what was the scarf that you wore today when you went out? And she answers, I made that scarf of your veil intent. So he basically she basically took Prophet Muhammad's, shawl or veil. And he said, this is then why the Lord made plain to your pure eyes the special hidden rain. So he's like, well, then what happened was that the veil that I wear, because it's part of me, it is something that because of that proximity to me, that veil is also connected to my inner soul. And God sometimes sends rain through that where it's invisible to everyone else. But in this case, since you had it on your head, you saw it. Does that make sense? That rain did not come from those clouds, my love. Other clouds float in different skies above. Okay? Did everybody understand that?
No, I got lost towards the end. I thought that he went and it was raining, but when he came back, it
wasn't raining where he was. Aisha saw rain.
Oh, Aisha saw.
They didn't go together. So Aisha saw rain. And then he comes home. She starts touching him and she sees that he's all dry. It's like, where were you? Today it rained, but you're not wet. What the hell? And Prophet is like, wait a second. What did you wear as a hijab when you actually left the house? She's like, I used your abba or veil or what that's what I used to actually put on my head. And then he's like, okay, that's why there is a different type of rain, which I experience and you don't. And I see that through my eyes and in this case, the abba or the veil that Prophet is using is the instrument of the way that the message comes to him. So she got to see a glimpse of it and she thought it's raining everywhere.
Oh, I get it now. I get it now.
Okay. So that's why he says then that rain did not come from those clouds. So that means that it doesn't come from the clouds that you see in the skies. There's different clouds. There are other things. The other clouds float in different skies above.
I get it.
Aziza, are you following?
I am following. I'm just curious, like why she saw rain in that particular abide. Like, does the Prophet just hold a huge burden? Like, I'm curious.
Okay, so there is explanation in a minute. Not in a minute. We probably won't get to it this today. But next week, there's an explanation. This is not an end of the story. By the way, this is still in the story of the guy who is in the, the old guy who's playing the harp. That one is not finished. Now we're into another story. All these things will converge into a story finally. So you guys have to keep all of them into your head.
Well, the chapter still says the old harpist up top, so I haven't lost sight of that.
Yeah, so I know why this is so difficult. All right, commentary on the verse of Hakim Sanai. Other skies found beyond, up with the soul. Command our own skies in their earthly role, and ups and downs obstruct the spirit's way, like mountains and deep seas to cross each day. He did a very good job as far as translating this one. Let's see what this means. So in here, Rumi is double downing on the nowhere, or in this case, the nothingness and the existence. Okay, so he further tries to explain to us what nothingness is and what's existence. So here's what he says. Some other clouds and rains far from your view exist in the unseen, and more suns too. just his elite, and this is God's elite, see this manifestation. The rest feel doubt as to new creation. Rain nurtures with its fresh, reviving spray, but also causes ruin and decay. So far, I think we're all, so he's talking about the fact that what we see as rain, and this is very true. When it rains, especially in Los Angeles, right? I mean, some people who are perhaps living in areas which is not susceptible to mudslide or floods, we're like, oh, this is beautiful. What a beautiful weather. The guy who has built a house on top of a Malibu cliff, which he just experienced, a burning fire, and now there is all sorts of ashes around him, all of a sudden is going to experience mudslide. So this is why he's saying that this is what a rain does. It's something that it makes things grow, and also it can ruin stuff. Rain nurtures with its fresh, reviving spray, but also causes ruin and decay. It does both of these things. The rain in spring is great. It makes things grow. Autumn rain is like a fever, though. This is also very true. When it rains in spring, especially if you guys, Atlanta is actually a good example of this. Atlanta rains all the time, right? I mean, Atlanta, you guys have rain, year round.
Yes.
Wintertime, of course, their autumn is beautiful. I mean, with the turn of the colors and so forth, it's just really gorgeous. Spring and summer is also pretty green and luscious green. It's amazing. So all these rain, these times it's raining, but this rain does different things to this earth. And Rumi is just bringing this up. So for us to consciously realize it, think about that. We don't think about it consciously. He's bringing all of these from our subconscious to our conscious mind in order to show us that at every instance of our life, there is a God in play.
Amen.
Yeah, we go to, let's say we take a trip, we go to Atlanta, we see the fall, and we're like, oh, what a beautiful, scenery. But we don't think about it this deep, that this is the same rain that was coming down in a different time, and it gave this life, and now it's taking life away. So the rain in spring is great. It makes things grow. Autumnal rain is like a fever, though. The former nurtures tenderly like breath. The latter makes things sick and pale as death. The wind and sun are just like this as well. Find the point of their difference, then tell. In the unseen, too, there is variety. While here there is barter, fraud, and usury. So let's see what this really means. So everything that so in this case, what he's trying to tell us is that actions are actions. Actions or thoughts are translated in the unseen in different things. And we then see the manifestation of them as it actually manifests itself in our life, the way we get to finally realize and see it. So let's read through this for a second. In the unseen, too, there is variety. While here there is barter, fraud, and usury. From that spring comes each breath the saints emit. Inside one's heart, a garden grows from it. Spring rain's effect enable trees to live. Is found too in the grace their breath can give. If there is a tree that looks as dry as sand, don't blame the wind which helps each soul expand. Okay, so what does this all mean? All right. The connection that we make with our subconscious in the unseen dictates what type of rain we are receiving. So the connection, what he's trying to tell us is this: the connection starts with us. The subconscious of what happens in the unseen only does what it's supposed to do. Let me give you an example so this opens up. If I have beautiful thoughts about my surrounding and about the people that are around me, at every instance, my subconscious picks this up. And once the subconscious goes to work, when I am not conscious, when the subconscious goes to work, it creates and brings these beautiful souls who are going to be around me. So the rain is the same rain. The subconscious is the same thing. I'm the one who gives it life or gives it death. I'm the one who gives it love or gives it hate. So it starts with me. I start it, and it manifests into what I start. And it shows me what's going on. Does that make sense? So spring rain's effect enables trees to live. It found true in the grace their breath can give. So their breath is the breath that in the unseen. My subconscious connects with the unseen and brings that breath into manifestation into my life. If there is a tree that looks as dry as sand, don't blame the wind, which helps each soul expand. So now he gives us an example that if you see a tree that is just dry, don't come and blame. So in this case, Rumi is saying that it was his choices that brought him that dryness. Now, the tree is not just the tree. We are the tree. There's two types of tree that I can be. One is the tree that is, completely fresh. And as the winds of life comes, I actually start swinging with it. And I still grow and I still, give life and I'm still standing. Or there's a tree that becomes extremely rigid, which when the winds of life comes, it's going to break because it cannot flex itself. Okay. Now, the fact that he's talking about the tree that it has completely is rigid, he's talking about the people who think that they know everything, they have figured it all out, and they have figured it out with their mind. So you have people who, if you notice, there are people who, when they first are introduced to you, they would tell you that, yeah, I am Dr. So-and-so. And just a few more sentences, then they expand on their resume. I got a doctor of philosophy from this place, and I got this, and I got that. Basically, imagine this: if you hear that, just remember that their ego is talking. Completely ignore that, because the ego is talking, and the ego all of a sudden, God forbid, you say something which is as deep of a sentence of one of these Rumi verses, but he does not necessarily agree with it. He would go to every length to make sure he knows that you knew that you were wrong. They would do that. Yeah. Why? Because somehow the wind of change started shaking the tree, and this tree is so hard, it cannot withstand the wind of change. And they either discontinue conversation with you, or they leave the place, or they'll say something that so you wouldn't continue it anymore. All of us have experienced this. This is really what this line is. It's like, don't blame the wind, which helps each soul expand. It's like the soul expands because the wind came and this thing was able to rock back and forth. That's how the tree grows. The wind first did its work, then moved ahead. For those who had souls, choose by it to be led. It's like the wind does what it's supposed to do. Some people choose to live by it and start, growing with it. And some people just chose to give themselves the hardest time ever. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's read this section as well. So he's saying, concerning the meaning of the hadith, take advantage of the coolness of the spring. This is actually a fairly famous hadith from Prophet Muhammad. It says, the Prophet told his friends once, please be aware, don't cover up yourself against the spring air, because your soul will gain from what pure breathe, which does to it what spring does to the trees. Okay, so this is a literal thing that, they say that the Prophet has said that when it's spring, don't cover yourself up, allow the breeze of spring just come to you, because it's a rejuvenating air. But you must flee autumnal cold instead, for it will leave you like those gardens dead. Okay, fair enough. Let's just see what these things mean. Transmitters brought as just a form outside, and simply with that they were satisfied. Now, transmitters in here is like, people who were memorizing these lines and telling others. I don't know why he's using the word transmitters. So the people who actually recited this back, they're like, hey, this is what Prophet said. So unaware that there is a soul to win, they saw the mountain, not the mind within. So he's trying to say that, these guys didn't understand exactly what these two lines mean. They thought that he's talking about the seasons of spring and autumn. Okay. But remember, he's now using the metaphor that he ended this story with. In here, what did he say? He said, remember, the wind first did its work, then moved ahead. Now he's talking about the wind, the breeze of the spring and the breeze of the autumn. I guess you guys can see what he's talking about now. We are constantly getting the breeze of the spring and breeze of the autumn. We need to know which is which, so that we open ourselves to the one that is the breeze of the spring, so it would allow us to grow, and the breeze of the autumn, we shut ourselves out. The words that helps your soul grow, you open yourself up. The words that actually, makes your ego grow, you close yourself down. That's basically what it is. So unaware that there is a soul to win, they saw the mountain, not the mind within. For God, the carnal soul's lust is autumnal. Wisdom and heart springs essence, thus eternal. Your clever reasoning hides like a cheat. Seek one whose intellect divines complete. So he's like, we are all basically, all of us are cheated by our cleverness. And in this case, he's saying that try to seek a person. And in this case, we are seeking Rumi, whose intellect divine is complete. So he's seen something and he is able to understand the divine message. Through your intellect may end up a hole. That intellect restrains your carnal soul. Here's the interpretation put in brief. Pure breath like spring breathes life in every leaf. So now he gives us his interpretation of those two lines above. Don't close your ears to what the saints report. Soft words or harsh, for they are your faith's support. So now remember, he's telling us to find, first of all, a saint, or find somebody who has find the divine intellect. Now, in this case, he's saying that once you found them, don't close your ears to what the saints report. Soft words or harsh, for they are your faith's support. Embrace with joy warm words and cold as well, till you escape from the fickleness and hell. And in this case, he's saying that whatever you hear from these people, if you found them, if you found the right saint, or the right person who could guide you through this. Sometimes these words are going to be harsh. Sometimes their words are going to be warm or cold. It's like embrace them with joy, because the words, if you have decided that he's the right person, that person is going to help you go through this, horrendous, ups and downs of life. The warm and cold, words, take him as they come, till you escape from fickleness and hell. They're both life's spring, the source of all that's good, knowledge, sincerity, and servanthood. Because the Spirit's garden lives through him, the heart's sea filled with pearls up to the brim. This is really beautiful. The fact of the matter is that we are alive because of the soul that is the good of God in us. So because the Spirit's garden lives through him, we live through him. We live through realizing God within ourselves. And then once we realize that, he says, the heart's sea filled with pearls up to the brim. Once we realize the goodness of God within us, we can fill our hearts, and this is just a metaphor, with pearls, with beautiful stuff. And once you fill your heart with beautiful things, there's no more space for ugliness or something that's vicious. It's just because, again, think about it. You're filling everything up with what's beautiful. There's nothing sad to actually put in there anymore. It makes you happy all the time. You're joyful all the time because your heart is full of joy, of these pearls. A wise man's heart is filled with endless grief if his heart's garden misses just one leaf. And the funny part, it says that if one of these pearls all of a sudden falls off, in this case, it says that a wise man, he basically sees that and he wants it back. He doesn't want to let go of any of it because he doesn't want any space to be filled with anything but beauty and goodness. And let's read this thing then, what Aisha asked. So Aisha asked the Prophet, what was the inner meaning of today's rain? Aisha then asked, dear Prophet, please convey to me the wisdom of the rain today. Was this the cleansing rain of clemency or wrathful justice from the divinity? A gift from kindness from the pure spring breeze, or the one harmful autumn qualities? He said, that's Prophet, this was to heal the misery which has afflicted Adam's progeny. If man were to remain inside that fire, the rate of loss and ruin would soar higher. Now, in the fiqh of both the Shia, the Sunni, and every other sect of Islam, there is a specific principle which says that this universe or earth or our world cannot live without the saints. The saints have to be, so that this, this universe or this world exists. Now, there is a specific statement here that, Rumi says from the Prophet. It says that the fact of the matter is that because of the fact that majority of people who live their lives, they don't understand where their sorrow is coming from and where their goodness is coming from. And they go through this pure not knowing, this not having the knowledge of how these things happen to them. There needs to be some kind of relief that comes to life so that people can live and move forward. If that relief doesn't come, people will just totally, get, hopeless, and they would not want to live any further. So he's saying the rain that you saw is this rain that he said it was to heal the misery, because majority of us are living in misery. We are living in misery. All of you guys know the Surah Al-Asr, right? You all know it. Al-Asr, innal insana lafi khusr. So it's by the token of time through the ages. Verily, man is in loss. That's us. That's why God says that we are all in loss, because not all of us are blessed to be familiar with, for instance, somebody like the Prophet, or like, people generally don't pay attention to these things and they don't want to know. Why? Because we believe our goodness and happiness always comes from outside of us. If Trump is president, I'm happy. If Biden is president, I'm happy. If so-and-so is here, I'm happy. That's our problem. The goodness and the bad comes from within us. This is why it says, "Innal insana lafi khusr." So we're always in loss, except such as have faith and do righteous deed and join together in mutual teaching of truth and patience and constancy. This is what this surah is saying. This is why we're always at loss. And now Rumi is telling us this. This was to heal the misery, because we're always at loss. So said our own God, or our own prophet in the Quran. If men were to remain inside that fire, the rate of loss and ruin would soar higher. So there is relief that comes to us. The world would be destroyed at once, no doubt. Cupidity in men thus driven out. The pillar of this world is heedlessness. This world sees as a curse pure thoughtfulness. It comes from that realm when it dominates. This world is brought low by what it dictates. This wisdom's sunshine greed is icy cold. Wisdom's fresh water, this world foul and old. From that world, gentle sprinkles always pure. Sprinkles. We can't even handle the entire rain. Sprinkles are supposed to come, not the entire thing. So gentle sprinkles come. So lust and envy here shall live no more. So in this case, it brings us so that we don't necessarily get confused either. We have to live, because our mind can't take it. Our mind can't take too much happiness. if such rain that are hidden should increase, both vice and virtue in this world would cease. Because we just, every bad deed would go away. Basically, the entire duality of the world would just go away. And we become confused because all of a sudden our mind goes mad. Has to be a balance. This topic has no limit. Let's return to outcome of Harpist's tale to learn. So, did it make sense? Are we good? Did we get it? Did I confuse you more? No comment?
You didn't confuse us more, and we got it later. Me, I shouldn't say we.
Okay.
But we are still in confusion.
So we know that then what the meaning of that rain was, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's very interesting. The Farsi, I was in your class that day, but I didn't get the rain. Now, tonight I got it. So that's good.
That's good.
Yes, that's very good.
I could have read that 100 times, would have never understood it, but thank you.
No. I mean, I don't think that night you explained the way you did it tonight, but I got it today.
I have to go back and do it again then.
Do it in English in the Farsi class.
Yeah.
Matin, you were saying something.
Oh, yeah, but just so the rain then is this other world.
It's not a rain itself. It's this healing, let's say healing blessing that just comes to this world from the other world. Yeah.
So that's part of the unseen. Aisha saw this.
Aisha just saw it because she had the prophet's veil.
So the prophet was always seeing this. And then it turns out that rain is a healing energy. So it's the blessings that are coming that we're not aware of.
Yes.
And if we had more of it, duality would cease.
Yeah, because our mind can't comprehend it.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, we are so consumed by our mind. Let me use myself as an example. In some point of my life, and this was probably 20 years ago, if something good would happen to me, I would literally think that there's a mistake. And I would deliberately do something to actually destroy it. Because I thought that I didn't deserve that. Think about it. It took me a while to figure it out that I did it. And our mind plays this with us. Something happens to us and we're like, the mind says, oh, you're not good enough for it. This is not yours. You shouldn't have been here. Why is this, you don't deserve this. Things like that. This is your mind thinking through it. This is exactly when you need to turn it off and get connected with your inner soul and realize that this thing is just the beginning and it's going to be more. And this is where you need to start expanding your soul. We need to expand our soul so that our ego gets less. This is our ego even defending ourselves. Believe it or not, it's a defense mechanism. It's like the more of this you get, the more attention you're going to get. The more attention you're going to get, the harder your life is going to be. So, hey, no, don't do it. Don't do this. Mess it up here, mess it up there so you can actually get out of it.
So that's kind of like where it says this world sees as a curse pure thoughtfulness.
Yes.
Okay.
Because it tells us that it's always something that your ego is showing you what you deserve and what you don't deserve. And we're driven by it.
I see.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
All right.
I mean, I feel like this is so profoundly beautiful. It just highlights so many of the other things that we've been kind of leaning into, which is that God's blessings are everywhere and God's beauty is in everything. I'm something still tugging at me from earlier where it said something like even the skeptics, or maybe the skeptics isn't the right word, but even the if you doubt God's presence or something like that, that's even still okay. But it's still a curse. And then it mentioned candy. It's as if you're sugar holding a candy stick. And I would appreciate kind of going back to there, because I thought that it was about the purity of the soul. And I'm wondering if it's like, I mean, I
So
guess here
that
it's like,
part was the soul and the body. So what he was saying is that you are given a pure soul. You have that goodness within you. Okay. Whether you like it or not, the soul and the body are going to somehow, they're intermingled. Okay. Now, you can realize there is one that actually carries the other, which is in this case, the body that's carrying the soul, right? And body is also affecting the soul. And the soul is also affected by the ego that's within us as well. So all these things are on top of each other, okay, and combine and are together. Now, what he says in that, I just want to make sure I'm not, what he's trying to say is that the essence of the soul never changes. The essence of the soul is like the essence of that pure candy. Candy, or that, if candy is, there's a stick in it. It's let's just the sugar candy that has a stick in it. The stick is not of of candy's essence. It's not sweet at all. It can, if it stays long enough with it, it can get the sweetness from it. But the sweetness of the candy is not coming from the stick that's attached to it. So what he's telling us is that there is the body that's like that stick. That stick, whatever it is, you try to make it more accustomed to what it's wrapped around. Or it's, God within itself. And that's why he came back and he tried to kind of dehumanize the body as well, in a sense. He came back and said, the soul is genderless. That's another thing. Because one of the things that our body tells us is that it also gives us an identity, right? I am Mohsen and I am a male because I have the gender signs. I have a specific feature of my face. I have a specific feature on my body. But he's saying that this is all there is. It then goes away. What stays with you is your soul. And your soul and your subconscious is what holds everything. And that's when I actually gave the example of riding a bicycle or knowing things and so forth, because at all of those instances, it's not your body which knows everything. It's your soul that has memorized all of that or has mastered it all. So it is, so we need to get more connected and in touch with that. Because that is where our true essence and our true divine, the melody is. That's where it's singing. That's where it's talking. But we cover it with so many different things, and we don't even reach into it. Did that help? I mean,
yeah, no, it definitely does. I mean, essentially what I'm getting is that anybody, no matter what, like you have your soul and you're on this journey and the blessings are abundant and they're for everyone. No one is excluded. Everyone can be on the same journey. It's up to you how close you come to your goodness and your essence.
right? And then notice the way he uses the examples. He uses an example of Prophet's wife and uses an example of Bilal. Two opposites, a white and a black. I mean, if you want to look at it from the way he actually goes in deep into how he chooses his characters, he uses the word Humaira. Humaira means a white girl. And he says that Prophet says, Kallamini ya Humaira, come and speak to me. Okay, but that's the speaking that I need because of my earthly body. But then he tells Bilal, hey, go ahead and connect me to my beloved. And Bilal is black. He doesn't, his tongue is he's tongue-tied sometimes. He doesn't pronounce things well, but that doesn't matter because it's his soul that's talking. The body says it the way it is, but the soul is saying the truth. Although he says, apparently he, when he was supposed to say ashhad, he would say ashad. He couldn't say shh. He would say ashad. And everybody was like saying that he's saying the wrong word. And Prophet is like, no, he's saying the right thing. Because he wasn't listening to what he was saying. He was listening to his soul. Our problem is that we see everything in the front and what people say and how they look and all these things. And these are all the judgment of our mind and ego. All right. Well, you all have a great night.
You too.
And I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
خسته
Yeah, me
نباشید.
too.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Michael.
Have a good evening.